I lift my hands to give you the glory. I lift my hands to give praise, and we will praise you. It's just a temple. Syrup all over the communion. Don't care so much. Over the Bible too. Yo, stop acting like you care about this. Stop acting like this matters to you.
Top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world.
So lastly, we got Pastor Mike Todd. And so I would actually like to hear, Kellie, your thoughts since you only seen the clip. And then me and Janessa can speak to since we seen the full sermon. So what was your thoughts when you seen the...
So I'm all about an illustrative sermon. Did I say that right?
Let's go.
It sounds wrong.
We go with it. Illustrative.
We know what you're doing. We know what you're doing.
What's the word?
Illustrative.
Illustrative.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'm all for an illustrative sermon. I'm all for, props and going all out and visuals and, because some people just aren't auditory learners. Some people aren't, take the notes and, and do that and learn that way. Some people, need the visuals. Some people need something they can see and reach out and touch and understand, because I can imagine that there's half of the people first of all, that's why transformation is so huge, because people love the visuals and the gimmicks and the props and everything that he does. Right. I think it was just, and I could imagine that his, and you guys can tell me what the sermon was about, but I'm guessing it's about, taking care of the temple and the body, and you guys act like you don't care because, you're throwing all this stuff. I was gonna use another word, but you're throwing all this, you're doing all of this stuff, and so clearly you don't care about, the Bible and the Spirit and taking care of yourself or whatever. Like I ain't even listened to the sermon, but I've been doing this long enough that I can figure out what he was talking about.
Right.
And so I'm bored. To me, it's just, now how far are we going? Cause this is real far. And it seemed like you didn't, did you bake some spaghetti and lasagna just to throw it? And did you have somebody, what was it, a pie or something that he threw? And I'm like, now are we going too far? Cause that pan of spaghetti could have gone to the people who struggling to figure out what they're gonna eat tomorrow or tonight after church. And you're doing a lot. Now again, I'm all for the illustration. Love it, get it. But I do think Mike Todd can probably bring it back just a little bit. Yeah, like bring it back just a little bit. Because I think that it rides the line of are we playing or are we preaching? And so that is kind of what my thing was. Again, I don't even mind the theatrics and the drama. And I'll say this too. I had a friend Berean. I had someone who figured out that I was a part of Berean, and they were like, "Oh yeah, my husband went to the church once with me and said he was so funny. They wanted to go again." And so went the next Sunday, and the person asked the husband, wife asked the husband, how was it? And he was like, "Oh, it wasn't that funny this time." And then he did, and they didn't really want to go back, and so that's the thing. And so my uncle is funny, and sometimes when you listen to him, he's at a, you do feel like comedy. But then there's times when he's serious, when we don't need the jokes. And so I think there's a balance in both. And I think Mike Todd may have to continue to do this level of drama because that's the only way he can keep the bulk of his congregation. where someone like my uncle, who is funny, and he's funny in real life, and that's, that's kind of who he is, can find that balance. Now, is he gonna lose a couple of them like this man because he ain't funny every single Sunday? Sure.
Right.
Does he also feel like that he has to each time do something more and more and more dramatic and theatric and whatever to make sure that people come? No. And so that's why I'm like, and so that's where I'm like, I'm with the theatrics, I'm with the drama, I'm with the illustrations, I'm with the props, I'm with all of that. But we may need to bring it back a bit to make sure that A, people aren't missing the word, and 2, people are only coming for the show, but they're also getting the word as well. So that was my thought.
So go ahead, Rudy. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, so like I said, I had seen the full sermon, and I forgot what, I think I might have seen him on a podcast or something talking about it, and I remember him talking about doing that illustration, which is what made me want to then go look up the whole sermon and see it or whatever. And so so a couple things. So one, like, I get your point, Kelly, in reference to like the, just say, food wastefulness aspect, like using the food, somebody could have ate that. And I mean, and he definitely had a huge table of foods that he didn't even use a third of all of it, honestly. So I'm hoping even what was left on the table was used to feed people or whatever the case may be. But nonetheless, especially even just growing up in Black households, I mean, wasting food is kind of a,
don't do that.
Right, that's a sin. But I know the key thing about the viral clip was him pouring syrup on the Bible. People saying like, "Oh man, I can't believe he poured syrup on the Bible." And to me, I feel like I remember when I was younger, and for whatever reason, I know like it was Miss Mary Moore, my mom, me and Risa, and we was getting in Miss Moore's truck that she had at the time, SUV, and something happened where I think they were moving stuff out the way so we could have room to sit down or whatever like that, and either my mom or Miss Moore, somebody had kind of like grabbed the Bible and kind of like threw it on the floor, not like in a disrespectful way, but just like put it on the floor in the back seat, like threw it on the floor or whatever. And I remember I made a comment, something like, "Ooh, you just threw God on the floor," or something like that. You know what I'm saying? And I remember Ms. Moore kind of making a comment like, "Oh man, like I don't remember what the comment was, but it was the point she was making was, Larnell, you need to like talk to your kids about how like this book isn't the same thing as just say like putting this book on the floor isn't the same thing as disrespecting God, basically, and that was like my first light bulb, just say, if you will, that went off towards that type of conversation. And so since then, I've never done like a huge deep dive or even had like that big of a conversation with my mom about it after that. But I did begin to realize that I was putting more, just say the actual book, the physical, tangible book, that just say the scriptures are written in, on a higher pedestal than I should have, because for one, anybody can print Bibles. You know what I'm saying? Like, and if you don't actually like check it, like I've come across Bibles that, Terry might have written because it had a second Acts in it. You know what I'm saying? Like you be going and you be looking at this in comparison, you be like, "Oh, this ain't right. Like, who printed this? This ain't," you know what I'm saying? And so so it's I mean, Trump got his own Bible. You know what I'm saying? That he was, so it's kind of like, I think people put too much weight on the fact that he was pouring syrup on the Bible versus just say the point that he was making. Now, to your point, Kelly, once again, wasting the food, maybe he could have easily just used a bunch of paint or something like that, you know what I'm saying, to kind of make the same point. But I know he was doing it because he was talking about, we mistreat our bodies with what we eat, what we put in it. Like we constantly stuffing ourselves with all these unhealthy foods. which is why he had the setup of like a little miniature church sanctuary in the background, and then the Bible and the communion, all that stuff was just on the podium. It was just all a part of the little setup. But people, like I said, they put a lot of weight on the actual syrup on the Bible versus the entire point. And the entire point is, I mean, it even speaks to what we all are going to kind of be holding ourselves accountable with, you know, like what we talked about earlier, like, you know, not only taking care of our bodies, but just being disciplined that can help us in all aspects. But I know, for one, Mike Todd is already a person that people kind of love to hate anyways. So anything that he does from here on out is going to kind of then be an issue. And I've definitely heard some sermons that I've had issues with from him that didn't even have nowhere near that level of illustration. It was just what was coming out of his actual mouth. You feel what I'm saying? That kind of more turned me off than just say the actual illustration. But I think I've shared this before, but I remember preaching a sermon before at my dad's church some years back that and I had the person who was running the sound play some secular songs that had the actual, like, it was unedited. They had the curse words and everything like that. And people looking around like, oh, Rudy, you do realize they actually saying the full words or whatever, right? But the whole point of my sermon was, if you're more offended by these words being said in this building versus these words actually entering your temple, then you're looking at this all wrong. You feel what I'm saying? And so somebody could easily say that I kind of took it too far with playing the curse words, you know, in the church. But at the same time, I don't know if my point would have been made as firmly without such a drastic, you know, example. And I'll even just say this, you know, in closing, I think the number one thing that I do respect about Mike Todd is, well, two things. One, he's gonna definitely always be himself, which he's that dramatic in any setting. I've seen him in podcast setting. I've seen him in he's that dramatic in any setting. But also, I've heard him talk about how they have these little cards they pass out at their church where they call them something like "not my cup of tea" cards or whatever like that. Because he was like, I understand that I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea. You know what I'm saying? But like, if you do desire to continue to go to church and grow, whatever like that, like, just fill out this card and we'll help you find a church that's more fitting for your style. You feel what I'm saying? Because you may not like my theatrics or whatever the case may be. And I respected that, because I'm like, at least he's not so caught up on himself where it's like, no, come in and see my, you know, my antics. But for the ones who like it, obviously stay. But if not, you can always, you know, go somewhere else. So I do think that, just like any human, I'm sure Pastor Mike Todd has his flaws, and maybe even there he does have to deal with a level of ego checking, or deals with his ego, whatever like that, in some capacity, because he has a huge platform. But I have seen inklings from him that make him not seem as bad as the clips in the internet have made him seem. Because I would much rather watch him pour syrup on that Bible than see Bishop 63-year-old marry that 18-year-old, or see Pastor Keon Henderson or that other pastor shush somebody and snap their finger at him or kick them out for having their hands raised.
So, and I know, Janessa, you still got to go, but I just want to say this. I feel like to your point, that Mike Todd is on God's call log more so than the rest of them. I like Mike Todd. I've heard a couple of his messages. I've read his book. I forgot the name of it, about relationship goals.
I have the book. I just haven't read it.
Yeah, I read it a while when it first came out. I read it and went through the workbook with some of my girlfriends. And I like Mike Todd, you know, and I think that, you know, to your point, that he is authentically him. Like I said, I think it's a little much. The syrup on the Bible didn't bother me, you know. Like I said, it was just an illustration. It didn't, you know, it didn't bother me. Like I said, you know, it's a book. But yeah, like I said, but I agree. I think Mike Todd is set apart from the other ones. I think Mike Todd was actually called to ministry, and to his point, to your point, it's just not everybody's cup of tea. You know, but like I said, I've gotten a couple of more little clips for him. He had one recently that came across my page about inclusion, and including the LGBTQIA plus community in his church. You know, he had even made the joke, trans is in the name. You know, but there's not that many Black churches that's going to say that, that's going to do that. And include everyone. And so I definitely feel like if anybody, this is my closing, if anybody is on the Lord's call law today, it is Pastor Todd. The rest of them, I don't know. Hey y'all, sorry to interrupt, but we have a few church announcements. Follow us on Instagram at TheWorstOnesPK. New content coming soon. We also have a TikTok at TheWorstOnesPK. No content yet, but continue to check us out. If you want to, when you listen to our podcast, you can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. Just make sure you type in The Worst Ones Podcast and you'll find us. And when you get there, make sure you like, you comment, you subscribe, and you share. Thank you to our 500,422 followers. We love you so much. Now, back to the show.
So I think I have just a slightly different perspective, but I did watch the whole sermon. The sermon was talking about, I think it was called Fit to Finish. And he was talking about how God won't basically give you a task that you cannot physically finish. So, and basically being conscious about our health, wanting us to be healthy. And he was talking about, the scripture that talks about, oh dang, it's slipping my mind, about the heart. God knows your heart, but he was talking about how God was also using that scripture as a physical symbolism of the heart, like making sure you're physically fit to do the things you're going to do. I think he used the example, like if he wanted you to minister to kids in Africa, but you're not physically fit to be in the conditions in Africa, how can God use you in that sense? And he also talked a lot about his personal journey with fitness, which is funny because it fits with what we've all been talking about, like what we need to deal with. But yeah, being physically fit to finish whatever task God has given us. I agree that Michael Todd's, I don't even know if antics is the right word, but whatever his illustrations, sometimes they can go a little bit far, because I know at one point he had like spit on his brother or spit some, and that was a lot. The pouring the syrup on the Bible, because when I saw the clip on the Shade Room, I think that's where the video came from, I didn't really understand the full context of what was going on. When I looked at the sermon itself, I believe that snippet, he was saying, and he even said in his sermon that a lot of y'all are probably going to be like, oh my gosh, this is too much, that you're desecrating, the church, but you do it to your bodies every day. Essentially was what he was trying to say. And that's why he was saying, like, y'all tripping, y'all doing too much, like y'all don't really care about this. And I could understand what he was trying to say, because when we do go to church, it's don't eat in the church, only drink water and eat your peppermints, only certain things can happen in the church. But like, if you was to go get a Big Mac, a number 7, and eat in the church, like everybody would probably be looking at you like, you need to take that to the fellowship hall. But on a daily basis, you might be smoking, drinking, listen to rap music, watching reality TV, whatever, and not even think twice about it. So I think he was trying to illustrate that point in a way that reach people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will say this is what I kind of think of Mike Todd now, because I used to really like him. And I did buy the book. I bought the workbook. I had never read it, but that's the whole situation for me. If it's not the Bible or a textbook, I ain't got it right now. Maybe once I grad school, I can actually like read for leisure.
Mm-hmm.
I have several books that people have given me or that I bought, and I just have not cracked them open.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I will say about Mike Todd, because I've kind of seen this with some other pastors too. I think Mike Todd is a great pastor for someone who is new to Christ and kind of needs that worldly example, or not saying that Mike Todd is worldly, but just needs that type of illustration to kind of make it make sense in their mind. As someone who's literally been in church since before the womb, if that's even possible.
Right.
You know, when I saw the full sermon, I personally didn't need him to pour syrup on the communion table or the Bible or the chairs or throw lasagna on the walls. Like, I personally did not need that to understand what he was saying. But I can understand if someone is new in Christ, how that can be drawing and how that can make sense up here for them, in their mind for them. And I've come to realize that there are some, because there's a need for it. There are, I don't know, I haven't really thought it out all the way. I just know that there is a need for pastors who can reach babes in Christ, as we like to call it. And then there are pastors for, you know, a little bit more seasoned, who's not just drinking milk, who want the meat and potatoes or whatever. And I think what I'm kind of seeing now, because I'm gonna be honest, I love Bishop Morton. I love Bishop James Harold Morton. But I don't know if he was necessarily a new babe in Christ type of pastor. You know, the singing of the hymns and the what was it? What, Rudy, what was it? Was it the grasshoppers in the graveyard and, you know, like that?
Oh yeah, the grapes, giants, and grasshoppers, or something like that.
Yeah, like some of
the angels in the graveyard was another one.
In the graveyard, like I remember hearing those as a kid, and it didn't mean nothing to me. I just know those were sermons that were big, and people was falling out and running around circles. But as a child, I did not really connect with it. So I definitely think there's a place for different type of preachers. Everybody doesn't have to be the same type of preacher. But one thing I'm seeing with Michael Todd is he doesn't always speak to me the way that I need to be spoken to at this phase in my life. There once was a time, especially when Relationship Goals and Crazy Faith and those series had came out, I was tuned in every week. But when I see him pouring syrup on the Bible, that does nothing for me. But however, someone who might be new to Christ or new to Christianity, that might be what they need. And so I don't want to discredit what he brings, because he's clearly touching people's lives. But I kind of go back and forth, and maybe I need to talk to God about it. Because I'm personally in a different place. Does that mean you dismiss someone like Pastor Todd? Or do you recognize that he's just not for you per se, but he still has a place in the grand scheme of the kingdom? I think younger Janessa would be all on board, like, yes. But older Janessa, I feel like maybe that could have been constructed or presented a different way without having to pour syrup on the Bible. Like, I 100% get what he was trying to do. But in today's world, was there something else that you could do? I don't know. Because I was even thinking about it when I was walking and listening to the sermon. Because sometimes we are kind of critical about some of the posts that we discuss. And I was just thinking myself, like, what's the alternative? We don't like what we see on the Shade Room, but what's the alternative? And then when I was thinking about that, I was kind of like, well, it's kind of hard to say what the alternative is because we're not pastors. You know, we're not ministry leaders. We're not people in those positions. So we don't have that burden to carry. We don't know what that pressure feels like. We don't know what that assignment feels like. So I don't know. Because in my head, I was like, well, let me figure out what's another way that Pastor Todd could have did that. Maybe he could have did the same things, but maybe he didn't just pour the syrup on the communion table in the Bible. Would that be okay? Or would I still feel like he was doing too much? But then I got overwhelmed because the sermon was 1 hour and 6 minutes, and I just I was trying to understand what he was doing. But I say all that to say is like even as PKs, we do not know what pastors have to deal with. We don't know what goes in their minds. We don't know the decisions they have to make, even though the pastors are our fathers or mothers or whoever. So in my closing, it wasn't for me, but I do realize, because I looked at it on YouTube and I was reading some of the comments, and I saw more comments saying this, I needed to hear this, versus something negative about pouring syrup on the Bible. I probably only saw a couple of comments about the syrup, and I probably saw about 20 comments saying that this was perfect. I gave my life to Christ. I repented. I did X, Y, and Z. So I think, it did do something in terms of pulling people to Christ. Now, my only concern, and this is just a personal concern, what happens when you outgrow what Michael Todd or whoever is preaching? Like, who are the preachers who are giving you the meat and potatoes? It's great to have the fluff to draw you in, but who, like, where do you go next? And I feel like, as someone, and maybe you guys feel this way too, I know my parents are 65 years old. Like, Kellie, I don't know how old your dad is. Rudy, I don't know how old your dad is.
About the same age.
Same age.
In their mid-60s. They're not gonna be here forever. Like, who else, once our parents are gone, who else do we look to for sound doctrine? Not antics, not fluff, not viral moments, but sound doctrine. That's the part I'm a little concerned about.
And I would say that there are pastors like the ones that we grew up with still around. They're just not the ones highlighted on social media. And so I like what you said that Pastor Todd does about not my cup of tea. Him realizing that this isn't for everyone because it's too much, or I've outgrown this, I don't need, or whatever. Like I said, I can see where the illustration touched a lot of people. Like I said, for me, I could tell you what it was about by watching that 20-second clip. I knew where it was going. I got you. Makes sense. I didn't need all of that, but I can see where people need it. And so, like I said, I really do like that. And I haven't heard that before, not my cup of tea. Because I'll say honestly, and this is no disrespect to you all, New Beginning probably wouldn't, and the youth church may have, but New Beginning probably not my cup of tea. Probably a little too traditional for me, Berean, we're a little more lax. And we came from New Beginning.
Right.
But, we're a little more laid back. And so I like that, because I think every pastor, every preacher, every church, every denomination isn't for everyone. You got to find your fit. And if you can find a pastor that is willing to help you find your fit, I think that's awesome. And I think that would maybe need to be done in more churches, is that, hey, you know, before you come here and you visit here, you heard such great things about Berean, but you realized that Berean wasn't the right place for you. Before you go sit at home for another year, let me help you find someplace else.
Right. Right.
I think that's great, because I think everything isn't going to work for. I know we've all I've visited a lot of churches over my years, and some of them like, oh, this is great, and I've gone to consistently, and some of them I'm like, nah, once was cool, didn't mind, didn't feel like I wasted my time today, but I ain't got to go back, so I think there's something out there for everyone, but I think sometimes it's just difficult to find what fits you.
Yeah. And I would even just say, I think I don't know this in totality, but I'm pretty sure at least some of New Beginnings, just say like decline when it came down to membership, especially in like Bishop Morton's later years prior to him dying, was it never grew, just say, or changed from what it had been all those years as far as the format, the traditional whatever, you know what I'm saying? So like now you're in this Gen Z social media world operating how you did in the 90s, earlier 2000s, whatever. And so I think just as Janessa pointed out, what's going to happen when you just say outgrow a Mike Todd style, there, that same question has already kind of been asked and maybe even unanswered for people who were more traditional, who came before him, so I think it's a constant I don't want to say changing of the guard, but there's a constant evolution that's going to happen in life as well as in the church. And, later down the line, what Mike Todd is doing will probably be considered traditional or, a thing of the past. And then it's going to be something, a new type of demonstration that would need to take place. And so I just think that, our biggest prayer is that as the needs of people evolve, the leadership evolves as well, and nobody is so stuck on, well, I need to, just keep being me and never pass the torch to somebody who can do it different than me. You know what I'm saying? Because there's going to always be a different need as new babes in Christ come along, and and so on and so forth. And but I think ultimately we all can agree that no matter what the evolution is, you definitely don't need to be kicking people out because they didn't pass out when you laid hands on them, or they didn't raise their hand when you told them to, or you snapping your fingers at them, telling them to shush, and and saying you only want to hear God's voice when we can also hear yours. You know what I'm saying? So so yeah, so I mean, that, and also I hope that at some point in social media we can get more of a flow of even the positive preachers and the aspects of that, and not just what we deem to be controversial. When I say we, I'm just saying like society, not us three, but what we deem to be controversial or even problematic or whatever the case may be. So hopefully that comes with it as well. So Janessa, you got jewels?
I do.
All righty, let's do it.
We'll see if this looks better because I moved my desk around so it's not as close. So this week's jewel is make sure you have friends around you who can help stretch you. And I know that sounds very surface, and another way you might say it is to pour into you. Make sure you have friends that can pour into you. Life is hard. And sometimes I was talking to one of my good friends about this, how I'm trying to learn how to hear God's voice, because it's not always audible. It's not always direct. Sometimes it might be through a song. It might be through someone else. It might be through something you read. And just being more in tune into how God responds, because I'm sure we all pray and ask God for things, that we want, but how often do we actually listen to hear his response. And one of my good friends, she was talking about herself, and she had no idea that she was pouring into me. But let me read you what she had said, because, and this is with everything. She had said, if you make a promise or say you're going to do something for yourself, you should follow through, because if not, you can't trust your own word, and it makes yourself a liar. And I was just like, dang, if I make a promise to myself or say I'm going to do something and then I don't follow through on it, if I can't trust myself, who else can I trust?
Right.
And she was just talking about herself with whatever issue she was going through. And I was like, man, I need to start following through on my word to myself, because if I can't trust myself, how can I trust anybody else? It starts with me. And even though we were having this conversation, it had nothing to do with me. She was pouring into me just by what she was doing in her personal life, the work that, you know, the self-work that she was doing with herself. And so I just, after having that conversation, it just really got me to thinking, like, you need to surround yourself with people who are working on themselves, working on themselves, but people who can also pour into you. And so I just want to share with all of our 500 and
I don't even remember the number no more.
31 million.
I ain't said it so long. I don't even know.
I don't know what the number is either, Kelly, but to get you some friends that can pour into you, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, but it will make you a better person. Life is hard. We are not meant to do this by ourselves. Like I said, God speaks to us, whether it's directly or through a song or through an article or a post or through a friend. And so make sure you just have friends that can pour into you, because it'll change your life. And that, what she said to me, changed my life. So now I feel myself trying to keep my word to myself, because I can't depend on anybody else but myself and the Lord. So that's the jewel for the week. The end. Bye.
And that goes back to our accountability, and what we trying to do to transform.
Absolutely.
Keeping our own word to ourselves, the goals that we said and didn't say today. Okay, man, I may go take a little walk real quick.
And and Janessa, I know you said you may not. I mean, unless God say so, you're not going to want to marry a pastor. I think a man may be marrying a pastor if he marry you, because you be preaching.
Whoa.
I think it may be the other way around. You worried about trying not to be a pastor's wife. You're gonna have a first husband.
That word.
Not a first husband.
You're gonna have a first husband.
Well, my ministry is the worst ones, because I'm definitely not preaching at New Honey Grove.
These jewels, they be sermons now. Yeah. And you ain't got to pour no syrup on the Bible or nothing. You be having.
Listen, but I will say
right.
I will say this. On Sunday, I ran into one of my mentees at church. I love her to pieces. And we have a graduation breakfast that we do for the high school seniors. And she was a speaker. And when she came up to me, she was like, Janessa, I was writing my speech and I thought about you. And I was like, me? I said, girl, I cried through the whole speech. She was like, oh, I cried before I started the speech. But it just kind of touched my heart, because I really feel like I'm winging it out here, y'all. The jewels, whenever people ask me to speak, whatever I'm doing, I feel like I am flying by the seat of my pants. But I do feel like God is slowly showing me that even though I feel like I'm flying by the seat of my pants, I'm impacting people. So that's cool with me. Lord, I don't need a platform though. I don't need a pulpit. I don't need a pulpit. This is good. I don't want to be a preacher. But it did warm my heart.
Everybody who's actually on God's call out, they said that same thing. Just to let you know. It's the ones who actually want to be the pastor that you got to worry about.
Right. I don't want to be.
Excellent point.
All right. Kellie, go for it.
At Princess Kels 51. I didn't even know what it was. 51 private.
That's a mess, Kelly. J Rihanna _. We have fun over there. I just posted some new garden stuff. So follow me. But Kelly, get it together 2025.
All right.
I gave you 6 months.
I can do that.
I gave you 6 months to get it together.
All right.
Plenty of time.
Plenty of time.
Shout out our producer at RHESA_ the letter G. And that's it for us, man. We appreciate you guys. For
claim matches on Amazon.
Shout out to y'all. Thank y'all for always supporting us, listening to us, watching us. Please like, comment, subscribe, and most of all, share this with someone. We would greatly appreciate it. We are the Worst Ones, and until next week, we are out.
Top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world.